In previous session, we started with disk management. In that, we have seen different types of IO management. We have seen different type of IO devices. Which are different types of IO devices? Human readable, machine readable, and communication devices. Then we have seen how these devices differ from each other, various criteria. Main is data rate. Then we have seen how IO module evaluate or evolved, starting from only processor was handling the job of IO management. Then IO module gets added, and uh, without involving a processor, it can now handle IO requests separately with the help of DMA and separate IO processor that we have seen in previous session. Now let's see what is a buffering, and it is called IO buffering. So we have seen that IO processes, we have to wait for input output to complete before proceeding. So every process has IO burst and CPU burst. CPU burst means the time it required a CPU for computation, and IO burst means it requires the time it requires to perform input output operations with the hardware devices. So to avoid deadlock, what is a deadlock? The processes are waiting for each other to complete the same task. So to avoid such deadlock, certain pages must remain in main memory during input output. So process is busy in IO, input output operation, so it is in wait state. And as per memory management topic, what we have seen, if the process is waiting for long time, better to shift or swap out that process to secondary storage, because it is taking up the memory and it is not using it properly. It is in sleep mode or wait mode. But as a to avoid deadlock, certain pages must be there in main memory even if that process is performing input output. So it may be more efficient to perform input transfer in advance to the request being made, and to perform output transfer sometime after the request is made. So this is very important statement. Means see, to perform any input or output operation, here application want to communicate with the hardware. Hardware is input output device, and via memory or processor. So suppose I want to print pages, I want to send data to a printer, so it will go from user application via memory to a printer. If I want to scan some documents, so from scanner to memory to my application. But what it says that here it is saying that it may be more efficient to perform input transfer in advance, means before the request is being made, before you are ready to accept the data, or you are already read the data in before user is asking for that data. For example, if you are reading a file and user is asking byte by byte, and you already read 3-4 bytes in advance before user asks for those bytes. So that is in advance you are processing input request, and in advance or sometime after you are processing output transfer. So to perform this, to make it more efficient, we need buffering. Buffering is temporary storage. So different types of buffers, like block oriented buffer. Information is stored in fixed size blocks. So you are accepting fixed size information in block by block manner. And this transfer is made one block at a time. A block at a time you can transfer from IO device to memory or memory to IO device, and can refer data by block number. So it will check whether all the blocks are received or not. If any block is missing, then it will ask for that block again, resend it, acknowledge it, etc. So data is referred by block number. It is mainly used for disk, hard disk, and USB keys, that is pen drive. Another type of buffering is stream oriented buffering. Here transfer information as a stream of bytes. Your data is in and out in the form of stream of bytes or characters. It is used for terminal, printer, communication ports, mouse, and other pointing devices, and most other devices that are not secondary storage. Mainly stream oriented is a character stream or byte stream. So initially there were no buffer. No buffer means no intermediate storage was available. Without a buffer, operating system directly access device as and when it needs. Suppose this is a user process and this is a IO device, and user process want to read data from IO device. So operating system directly connect IO device to a user process. There were no buffering. So sometimes process has to wait if that IO device is busy, and it may create a deadlock. That is with no buffering. No buffer was used. In case of single buffer, operating system assigns a buffer in main memory for IO request. So there is a buffer. Buffer can be a set of memory locations, and operating system in advance keep this data, read data from input device and keep it with it. And whenever user process asks for the data, operating system can pass this data to the user process and can read next data in advance without asked by user process. That is with single buffering. Single buffering speed up this process, as well as it will minimize the load of deadlock. So process no need to wait for this IO device because data is already with the operating system and user process can use this data with a single buffer. Now in single buffer, we have again block oriented single buffer where data is transferred in a block. So input transfer made to a buffer. Block is moved to user space where needed. The next block is moved into the buffer, read ahead. It is called read ahead or anticipated input. So if we have block 1, B1, B2, B3, B4, 4 blocks, this process want to read. So first block is already there with the operating system B1. So when user process read B1, at the same time operating system will read B2. So B2 data is moved or B2 block is moved from IO device to operating system, and B1 block is moved from operating system to user process. Often reasonable assumption that as data is used access sequentially. It is the assumption. Assumption here is data required by user process is a sequential data. Means you need B1, B2, B3, B4 in sequence. If B1 is already in the operating system and user process asks for B2, then operating system has to discard this B1 and read B2 again. So this will fail the role of single buffering. Stream oriented single buffering, as the name says, stream oriented. So you are reading the data in sequence, line by line or byte at a time. Terminal often deals with one line at a time with carriage written, that is enter key, signaling the end of line. So you read data one line at a time till user press enter. Byte at a time suits device where single keystroke may be significant. So you can also take a data in terms of bytes. Every keystroke is a new data. For example, sensors, controllers, the data which is received from sensors or controllers is in the form of stream-oriented buffering. Another type of buffering is two buffers. Means at a time process can multiplex this. One block is read by user process, at the same time another block is stored in operating system. So use of two system buffers instead of one. A process can transfer data to or from one buffer while the operating system empties or fills the other buffer. So currently this data is already there in the operating system. In advance, operating system read this data from IO device, and when user process requests it, this data is moved to the user process. At the same time, operating system will read the data from IO device into this second buffer. Now when user process needs second buffer, this point it will read from this second buffer, and first buffer, which is now empty, will get new data from IO device. So process can transfer data to or from one buffer while operating system empties or fills the other buffer. So your operating system is filling this buffer and emptying this buffer. This is with the help of two buffer. Here again, efficiency will increase and the deadlock problem can be resolved. Another type of buffer is circular buffer. So we can have more than one buffers like this. In a circular manner, one buffer gets emptied and another buffer gets filled. So each individual buffer is one unit of circular buffer used when IO operation must keep up with the process. If the data is continuous data, you're continuously reading. If it is a live broadcasting, or you're continuously getting a data from sensors or actuators, and you immediately want to process that data and perform some operation. At this time, the circular buffer plays an important role. Data can be advanced, read from the input device and kept in the buffer and transferred to the user process from those particular buffers. Limitations of buffers. Buffer smooths out the peak of IO demand. So if process is asking for IO continuously, and instead of every time with a request then go to the IO device and read data, you know that speed of IO device is much less than the speed of process or processor and main memory. So waiting time will be more. So instead of that, if buffering is used, you are reducing those buffering time or IO device waiting time. So buffering smooths out peaks of IO demand, but with the enough demand, eventually all buffers become full and their advantage is lost. If buffers are full, then again every time operating system has to get data from main memory. However, where there is a variety of IO and process activities to service, buffering can increase the efficiency of operating system and the performance of individual process. Why to use buffering? First goal is we have to increase efficiency of operating system, and second goal is we have to improve performance of individual processes. If the wait time is reduced, then automatically performance of process gets improved. Any queries about buffering? Why we need buffer? What are different types of buffers used here? No buffer, single buffer, double buffer, and circular buffer. Again, in buffering, we have two types, block oriented buffer and stream oriented buffers. If there are no queries, we'll move to the second topic. Next topic is disk structure. We are moving towards disk scheduling part. Disk is a hard disk or secondary drive. So first we'll see disk structure and then disk scheduling. So disk drive, that is our hard disk or secondary storage, are the addressed as a large one-dimensional array of logical blocks that we have seen. Like main memory is also large array of logical blocks. Similarly, disk drives are also addressed as large one-dimensional array of logical blocks, where logical block is the smallest unit of transfer. So like I said, the size of logical block is one page, and size of the page, say 8-bit, 32-bit, 16-bit, 64-bit. That's how we can measure the size of one block, one logical block. That is called unit of transfer. The one-dimensional array of logical block is mapped into the sectors of disk sequentially. Sector 0 is the first sector of first track of the outermost cylinder. So just remember these names, sector and cylinder. Mapping records in order through that track, then the rest of the tracks in the cylinder, and then through the rest of the cylinder from outermost to innermost. So your hard disk or any disk is made up of, these are called platters. Then this circular part is called a track. So there are concentric tracks on each platter or each disk. And each track, you can see the small parts, these are called sectors. So this small part is a sector. And these inner concentric circles, these are called tracks. And if you can map all platters, one disk is called a platter. One flat disk is called a platter, and each track on each platter, if you can imagine, this is an imaginary cylinder. This dotted line is imaginary cylinder. So there are concentric cylinders also. And this is read write head. And your disk is moving like this, and head read write head is moving from outermost to innermost like this. I want to show you a video.
Now let's discuss the general structure of the magnetic disk. The magnetic disk consists of platters stacked upon one another and mounted on its spindles. Each platter will be having two surfaces, one top surface and the bottom surface, and each surface has a magnetic material on it and can keep data or information on it.
Is it audible? So these discs are called platters, and these discs are arranged in a spindle.
To read or write data from each surface will be associated with a read-write head. And the read-write head for all the surfaces are mounted on an arm which can move these heads towards the central spindle and away from the spindle towards the edge. Or
So this is read write head which is attached to each platter, and it will move. This is called arm. These read write heads are mounted on the arms, and this read write head will move from arm to the spindle and spindle to the arm. This is the horizontal movement of arm, read write head.
all the heads move together in a synchronized fashion and they all will be at the same relative position at a time. Each platter is then divided into circular shaped tracks. Data is first written to the outermost track, which is termed track 0. The tracks at the same distance from the center on all the platters together form a cylinder. In other words, all the tracks which are at the same head position together form a cylinder. Then each track is further divided into sectors. We saw that by moving the head towards the spindle and away from the spindle, the head can reach each and every track associated with it on its surface. Now usually in hard disk, after approaching the correct track, the head stays at its position and then the platter rotates about its spindle.
Means head is moving in horizontal direction. It covers all the tracks starting from track 0. Outermost track is track 0 to the innermost track, and a read write head will point to the same track in all platters. And if this read write head is pointing to this track, now this disk will move or platter will move in circular manner, so that all the sectors from that particular track can be read. So this is the circular movement of the disc, and this is the horizontal movement of our read-write head.
Usually all the bladders together. This way, head can reach each and every sector on the corresponding track. By this movement, head can approach every point on the surface and is able to access the data or information kept on the surface. Now we can see that the length of the outer tracks is higher than that of the inner tracks. But the number of sectors in each track is kept same, and the bit density is kept lower in outer tracks than the inner tracks. In other words, the bits are more densely arranged in the inner tracks than the outer tracks. Why? To understand why, consider the top surface of one platter. Let this be the outermost track of the platter and let this be one of the inner tracks. Let the head be here on the outermost track. Now consider a line and let this be a point along this line on the outermost track under the head. You know that after approaching the required track, the head stays at its position and the platter will rotate. While the platter is rotating about the spindle, actually, this point will be revolving around the spindle. By the time the platter completes one rotation, this point will complete one revolution around the spindle and reach the same point under the head. Now let the head be here in the inner track and consider a point along the same line on this inner track under the head. While the platter completes one rotation about the spindle, this point will also complete one revolution around the spindle and reach the same point under the head. Consider the time taken for this. The time taken for this point to complete one revolution around the spindle and reach the same point under the head is same as the time taken by this point to complete this revolution and reach the same point here. If so, then of course this point will be moving faster along the outer path, because the length of this outer track is longer than that of the inner track. So for both of these points to reach the same point at the same time, then this point should be moving faster. This happens in case of hard disk. If we consider any point along this line, while the platter completes one rotation, all the points on this line will complete one revolution around the spindle and reach the same point here. Because usually in hard disk, they rotate with constant angular velocity. Thus, to maintain this constant angular velocity, the speed of the outer tracks or outer surfaces it should be faster than the inner tracks. That is, the linear velocity of the outer tracks should be higher than that of the inner tracks. Thus, the problem is the outer track is longer than that of the inner track. Hence, the outer tracks can keep large amount of data than the inner track. Hence, within a particular time or by the time the platter completes one rotation, since the outer tracks are moving faster under the head, more data will be read from the outer tracks compared to the inner tracks. But in hard disk, within a particular time, the amount of data which can be accessed is kept constant. This is to make the calculation easier. Hence, we keep the data density lower in the outer tracks and keep the number of sectors same in all the tracks. Thus, while the platter completes one rotation, It will cover one entire track, whichever be the track, whether inner tracks or outer track, within one complete rotation of the platter. One entire track can be covered and the same amount of data can be read. To maintain this, we keep lower bit density or lower data density in the outer tracks than that of the inner tracks. As a result, within one rotation time or within a particular period of time, same amount of data will be accessed from any track.
Welcome to Python is Easy, your path to becoming a Pythoneer or Pythonista. Variables, functions, statements.
I hope this structure is clear to you. So these circular discs are called platters. These platters are divided into concentric circles. These are called tracks. And a same track on each platter uh, creates a virtual cylinder. It is called a cylinder. It is represented by small c sector. If all the tracks are divided into small parts, these are called sectors. And as we have seen in the video, number of sectors in innermost track is similar to number of sectors in outermost track. This is called arm assembly. Read-write head is attached to the arm assembly. This read-write head move from in horizontal direction from outermost track to innermost track like this, and backwards. And these platters move in a circular manner in along between the rotation with the spindle. So when the read-write head is pointing to a particular track, means it is pointing, all the heads are pointing to a particular cylinder. This uh, platter will move or rotate along with the spindle, and every sector can be read from the particular track. Then all the sectors are read, then head will move backward and read another track, all the sectors from another track. Similarly, it will read complete data. So this is how this assembly works, or disk structure works. Now, what is the role of operating system? The role of operating system is responsible for using hardware efficiently, as we have seen in I/O management. Now, the current input output device we are taking currently is disk drives. This means we want fast access time and disk bandwidth. Maximum data should be read in minimum time. So this is called access time. It has two major components. First one is seek time. Seek time is the time for the disk or to be moved head to a cylinder containing the desired sector. If you want to read a particular data, the time required to move this cylinder to particular track and to rotate this cylinder, rotate this platter to get that particular sector under this read-write head. So this is called seek time. Seek time is to find the particular sector where we want to read the data. Seek time is the time for the disk to move the heads to the cylinder containing the desired sector. And rotational latency is the additional time waiting for the disk to rotate desired sector to the disk head. Means first we have to move this head to the desired track, that is a seek time, then rotate this disk to get that particular sector under this read-write head, that is rotational latency. So together seek time plus rotational latency is nothing but access time. So role of operating system is we have to minimize this seek time, and seek time is proportional to seek distance from where is the current head position. Suppose current head position is at 10th track and you want to read data from 50th track. So you have to move from 10th track to 50th track. So that is a seek distance. Disk bandwidth is a total number of bytes transferred. Suppose from that sector you want to read particular number of bytes. So that is called disk bandwidth. How many bytes can be transferred from sector to read write head? Which is divided by total time between the first request of a service and completion of last transfer. So if suppose you want to read 100 bytes and you made a request, so the time is start time, and after completion of 100 bytes transfer, that is a finish time. So total time elapsed between that is called disk bandwidth. In disk scheduling, operating system help disk to move head in efficiently from one track to another. We are going to learn different scheduling algorithms, disk scheduling algorithms. Uh, these algorithms exist to schedule services of disk I/O request, and this is called a request queue. Suppose we assume that we have 0 to 199 tracks, and these are the requests. First request is to read from 98, then 183, then 37. These are the track numbers, and current head position is 53. So how to move, how to complete all these requests so that the seek time should be reduced or access time should be reduced. So in next lecture, I'll stop here. I have a meeting right now. So in next lecture, we'll see all those algorithms, people, then we have scan algorithm, C-scan algorithm, and shortest time first algorithm. So FCFS, all these algorithms we will see in the next lecture.